Okay, so in the interest of time, we are going to make a start. Hello again. It is a pleasure to have you with us here today. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we live and work. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. As a language professional myself, I recognize that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are the original communicators and storytellers of this land. I honor the enduring strength and diversity of First Nations languages, the first languages of this continent, and also their role in maintaining culture, identity, and connection across generations. My name is Despina Amanatidou, and I am a NATI certified interpreter and translator, a tutor, and a trainer in interpreting. I come to you as the head of interpreting of 2M Language Services, and I'm also leading the Employment Success Program for interpreters, this program here, of which this webinar forms part. The IESP is an Ethnic Communities Council of Queensland initiative delivered in partnership with 2M Language Services and Settlement Services International. The program is funded through the Workforce Connect Fund, powered by the Queensland Government's Good People, Good Jobs, Queensland Workforce Strategy 2022 to 2032. So before we begin today, I'm going to go briefly over some housekeeping rules. You're encouraged to submit questions and comments using the chat function or the Q&A box of your Zoom instance. AI note-taking tools or external recording applications are not permitted, so they will be removed if they are featured in the participants list. Auslan interpretation will be provided to support accessibility for all attendees. So we kindly ask all speakers and participants to be mindful of the Auslan interpreter by speaking clearly and at a measured pace to ensure accurate and effective interpretation. The last thing to note, we won't be issuing certificates for this webinar, but should you be audited by NATI, if you are a NATI credentialed interpreter, we are more than happy to attest to your participation in this session. And now, with all of this covered, welcome to induction webinar for the ISP number 9, Introduction to the Australian Institute of Interpreters and Translators, or AUSIT for short. Today, we will discuss the role of AUSIT in the industry, the key benefits of AUSIT membership, professional standards and expectations for interpreters and translators, career development pathways and industry opportunities, and strengthening one's professional profile and connections. We are very pleased to welcome our guest speaker, Carl Jean Fordham, who is the National President of the Australian Institute of Interpreters and Translators. Carl is a NATI certified translator, Chinese into English, and interpreter between Mandarin and English, and holds a Master of Social Science, Translation and Interpreting Studies from the RMIT University. Carl has extensive experience training future translators and interpreters at leading institutions in Australia and internationally, and is very passionate about strengthening the profession and supporting fellow practitioners. Thank you very much, Carl. We do appreciate your time being with us today, and it is over to you.
Thank you so much, Despina, and very warm welcome to everyone attending this evening, both online and with me right now in front of me because I'm coming to you live from the University of Queensland. So it just happens to be that I teach interpreting here at this time, and we've just finished a 3-hour interpreting class. And my students haven't passed out with exhaustion, which is always a good sign. And they've actually stayed behind to have a listen to my talk. So I would just want to give you just a little wraparound view of our beautiful conference interpreting facility at the University of Queensland. You can see, hopefully you can see that okay. We have lots of booths there for students to practice simultaneous interpreting. And these are my lovely students in the Chinese stream at the University of Queensland. So these students are completing a master's program. So we have a master's program for Chinese and Japanese at UQ. And I teach in both streams, but for interpreting specifically for Chinese. So yeah, I just wanted to show that to you. I'm very proud of my students, and they're very dedicated. So we have, I think, just under an hour tonight. So I'm going to try to be economical with my time and try to give you the best kind of overview of AUSIT that I can give. So I'm going to try to split it up into 3 parts, and I'm hoping that we will have a bit of time for a Q&A. So whether it's my students or if attendees on Zoom, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat and I'll address them. So first, I'll just give a little overview of what AUSIT is. So Australia is quite special as a country. We're the only country in the world where we have 2 different organizations for translators and interpreters. So we have one organization which does testing, so certification, and that's NAATI. And then we have a different organization, which is the professional association that represents translators and interpreters. So it's really interesting, you know. So in Australia, NAATI is funded by public money, by governments, and then the association is funded by the practitioners. The practitioners pay a membership fee. So in other countries, it's just one organization that does both. And you can imagine that can get very difficult because there's so much work that we do that we need to cover. So the question is, what's the difference between the two? Well, like I mentioned, NAATI does the testing. So NAATI is a certifying body. Now, what AUSIT does is really to give a voice to translators and interpreters across Australia. Part of that is working with stakeholders. When I say stakeholders, I'm talking about government, for example. You know, we work across all 3 branches of government, whether it's judges, for example, training judges on how to work with interpreters, whether it's the executive, so government departments, when they're engaging interpreters or translators, but also parliamentarians, because we advocate for better working conditions as well. So that provides a voice for interpreters, but there's a lot of other work that we do. We're a national organization. We have over 2,000 members. And you can imagine we've grown a lot since our humble beginnings back in 1987. That's the year I was born. That's when we were first founded. Just to give some examples of what we do, like I said, it's a very big organization. I'm not going to cover everything, but one thing I think that AUSIT's very proud of is our professional development and also social events. We, through our branches, so branches are the local office of AUSIT. Through our local branches in every state and territory, we have regular events, where the social events where you can meet fellow practitioners, which is really important because As you know, it can be lonely at times working as a translator or interpreter, but also professional development, like I mentioned. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find PD of such high quality that covers the enormous breadth of our work, because, as you know, TNI covers everything from literary translation, technical translation, conference interpreting, community interpreting. It's just so broad. So that's something that I think AUSIT does really well, is to provide that high quality and bespoke PD opportunities. And then I think another thing that AUSIT's really proud of is our code of ethics, which we formulated a long time ago. Code of ethics was a world first document. I believe it was one of the very first documents which provided a kind of baseline, a standard that translators and interpreters could aspire to. And so we formulated that. We had a second version of the code, and now we're working on a third version, which will take into account new developments. For example, AI is a really big one. So really proud of the code of ethics and the work that our ethics committee does in terms of fielding complaints, grievances about translators and interpreters, and allowing them an opportunity to a fair hearing and to determine, whether there has been a breach of the code of ethics, and if so, what action should be taken. I think another thing that's really important that we do is advocacy, like I mentioned, our work in advocacy. In particular, I think our advocacy committee has focused on court interpreting recently. So the past couple of years, we've been working really closely with the JCDI, that's the Judicial Council on Diversity and Inclusion. And that's about making sure that we collect data about our experience interpreting in courts and tribunals, and then feeding that back to the judiciary and to registries as well, to improve working conditions and standards across the board. So, for example, in Queensland, we've had a lot of interpreters being engaged by telephone, and that's something that we've been advocating on, to kind of stamp out that practice, to use video as a minimum, if not on site, but also to raise awareness about equipment that is available in the courts. Hearing loop, for example, simultaneous interpreting equipment. Just to give you some examples, these are the things that we've been working on in advocacy, and there are others. Another thing that Oz has been doing is our communications portfolio. What that means is the way that we communicate our worth as a profession to the outside world. You may know we have a publication called In Touch magazine. You Google that and have a look. In Touch magazine provides really important publication that connects translators and interpreters to each other, but also to the outside world. One more thing I'll mention is our education portfolio. We have close relationships with different universities and other training institutes, like University of Queensland, where I am. And we have a mentoring program, which is a fantastic opportunity for students and for other early career practitioners to learn with someone who has been in the field for a long time. And I think one more thing I'll mention about AUSIT is our national conference, which is the highlight of our calendar as translators and interpreters. And we rotate the conference, so a different branch holds it at a different time. So this year it's being held in Adelaide in South Australia, and it's organised by the local branch, which is a huge job, but everyone looks forward to it, and it's certainly a really enriching few days for practitioners to learn together and to meet new people. So that's really just a kind of general introduction about AUSIT. In terms of membership in AUSIT, you might be wondering why. Why should I pay my dues to become a member of AUSIT? Firstly, it should be noted that there are different levels of membership. So if you're interested, you can have a look on the website. For example, if you're a student, that's a different membership payment compared to other levels of membership. In terms of the specifics, I would say Firstly, would be the resources that we provide to practitioners. So if you're a member of AUSIT, you get access to a range of resources. There are many different resources I can't give you specifics now, but if you log in, you'll see there's translation resources and interpreting resources. We also offer discounts for particular products like WordFast. There's also discounts for liability insurance for professional translators and interpreters. There's also the use of an interpreter and translator directory, which allows your name and details to be listed so people can find you to book you. Another benefit, I think, is the newsletters that we send out. As a translator interpreter, sometimes it feels very isolating. Sometimes you don't get that connection to the broader profession. So these newsletters are a really good way to stay connected, to stay up to date with what's going on in the profession because it's changing so quickly. And also to seize opportunities that you wouldn't know about if you weren't an AUSIT member. They could be jobs, for example, career opportunities, could be PD related, it could be research related, all kinds of opportunities. Another benefit is language division. A language division is a group within AUSIT who share the same language, and they organize events, PD and social events, which are specific to that language. And so that provides a really interesting way to engage with colleagues and to work on issues that are really specific to your community. So we have the Chinese one, an Arabic one, German. I think now we have maybe 10 or so language divisions, and those activities are free for AUSIT members. So that's another benefit of AUSIT membership. One more thing I'll mention about AUSIT membership that I think is central to AUSIT is that it provides a sense of belonging. It provides a sense of connection to the wider industry. And that presents all kinds of opportunities for you as a practitioner. Yeah, as you know, most of us don't work in a 9-to-5 job, right? Most of us are working, whether it be freelancers, casual employees. And so for us, we really have to chase the latest opportunities to stay ahead. And I think AUSIT does a really good job in that regard by giving you those opportunities for networking and professional development. So I think they're kind of like the main benefits of AUSIT membership as I see it. I think on a personal level, there have been many times in my career where I've felt stress. I've felt a lot of challenges, especially because I do a lot of court interpreting. And in those hours of need, it's AUSIT members who have proven to be my greatest source of support. So being able to directly reach out to someone who has been in your situation is invaluable. And without that, I think it can be a very lonely and difficult experience as a translator interpreter. So that, for me personally, that's something that I find is one of the most significant benefits of AUSIT membership. So that's kind of AUSIT in a nutshell and benefits of membership. I'm going to move on and talk a bit about industry expectations. And by industry expectations, what I'm talking about is, what is the standard that employers expect from translators and interpreters? So what are they actually looking for in our work? I think there's a couple of things here, and a lot of these actually are things that AUSIT can help you with. One is technical proficiency, so being able to use the latest technology. Now, of course, for some of us, it may be straightforward, using things like Zoom or Teams, Word, things like that. They're more entry level, but there are more bespoke technical skills that AUSIT can help you with. For example, using AI tools in an ethical way or in an efficient and effective way. There's also, I think, the soft skills that employers will be requiring from us as translators and interpreters. I think, again, I'm not a language service provider, but I imagine for agencies out there, they're looking for dependability in their interpreters and translators. They're looking for people who can communicate at speed with clarity and be able to respond For example, if they're reaching out, are you available for this job? Things like that. It sounds very kind of basic entry level, but these soft skills make a really big difference, especially when you are often depending on agencies to get work that matters to you as a practitioner. I think another thing which ties in well with AUSIT is our code of ethics. It's really no surprise that the code has become that standard that practitioners in Australia and New Zealand look to. And I think we can learn a lot just from those basic principles. So I'm assuming most of us here have read the code. So I'm not going to go into that into too much detail, but certainly I think an industry expectation is familiarity with the code and living up to the principles in that code. For those of you who work in courts and tribunals, understanding the recommended national standards is another really important document as well. The last thing I think that industry expects from us as professionals is resilience. To be frank, it is a difficult time at the moment, especially for translators. I myself used to be a full-time translator. I worked as a freelance translator for about 12, 13 years after I graduated. And back then, of course, was a very different working environment and industry as to what it is now. And, I made the pivot into interpreting. I'm kind of glad that I did because I think translation at the moment is a very difficult space to work in. And interpreting is also facing challenges, although it's somewhat insulated. So I think this is where resilience comes in. It's where continuous learning comes in. As practitioners, it matters more than ever before that we're on top of the industry. We understand what's going on in our industry. What are the latest developments, right? What are our predictions about the future? These are questions that I think AUSIT can help you answer, or at least give you a reference answer that you can take home. So that sense of resilience, I think, is super important for employers and continuous learning as well. Then my last kind of topic is about career development and specifically about pathways for career development. And I think obviously for students in particular, this is an essential question. So I guess the question is, what is the roadmap, right? What roadmaps or what pathways do I have available as a budding translator or interpreter? And it's interesting because in other professions like law, for example, in medicine, there are a lot of very clear and well-trodden pathways that people take. With translation and interpreting, of course, it's very different. With translation and interpreting, there isn't one pathway, and there's not even multiple pathways. There's really no pathway at all in terms of a set, number of steps you have to take to do A, B, and C. What I think is important is, as an individual practitioner or a student, is to figure out where you want to be in, a year's time or 2 years' time as you're developing those basic skills. Because of course, as a translator interpreter, you have to have basic skills. Obviously you have to be bilingual, you have to be bicultural, and so on. So looking into the future, figuring out what your objective is, and then backward mapping from that. So, okay, my objective is ABC, and then what are the steps I need to take to reach ABC? So I'll just, I'll list a couple of options for you, and you can consider this in light of your own situation. So firstly, you need to figure out, are you focusing on translation? Are you focusing on interpreting? Very, very different. If it's translation, are we focusing on literary translation? Are we focusing on technical translation? Very, very different. Community translation is another. With interpreting, are we focusing on community interpreting, conference interpreting? Will we be staying in Australia? Will we be working internationally? These are all things that will have a huge impact on your pathway. So my advice is first figure out which of those sectors you want to work in, and then find examples of people who have achieved that. And this is where platforms like LinkedIn are very, very useful, because it allows you to quickly find people who have already taken that path. So identify what that person might be, that professional that you're looking up to, and then take them out for a coffee. Reach out to them and ask them if they'd be interested in answering your questions about how they got there. Part of that is understanding the importance of specialization. Specialization, I think, is a lesson that all practitioners have to learn eventually. I'm someone who kind of procrastinated for many years doing that, because I guess I just loved language so much. I didn't really want to get into specialization, but eventually I had to, because if you really want to make a career out of it, you will have to eventually specialize. So in my case, I was lucky that I was able to use my knowledge of law to find a specialization in legal translation and interpreting. So for example, in Australia, there's quite a large private market for lawyers, for example, law firms, to engage translators and interpreters. So I identified that market and I leveraged my expertise to access that market. Now that sounds simple, but actually that's a very long story to get to that stage. It takes years of training, experience, and understanding yourself to know that that is a specialization you want to focus on. Now, the question for you as a practitioner is, what is that specialization going to look like? And is there demand? That's another really important one. The demand in Australia might be very different to the demand in another country. You need to work out where you're going to aim, which market you're going to aim at. And then with the specialization, the question remains, apart from subject matter expertise, what other things can I do to reach that goal? So you've got your bilingual skills, your bicultural skills, you've got your subject matter expertise, but then what? Well, you can consider, obviously, certification is a really big one. Again, we're quite lucky that in Australia and New Zealand, we have NAATI, which provides that independent certifying body that allows us to test our skills and provides us with a certificate to show that we have the basic skills required. So that's a really good starting point, but it's not the only starting point. You can also consider qualifications. So again, it depends where you're based, but a qualification in TNI is always going to be helpful in working towards that specialization. Continuous professional development is also helpful. At the moment, AUSIT is looking into what's called micro credentials, and other providers are also doing that. Micro credentials is kind of like short courses that you can take that are very, very specific. So it's very specific skills or expertise. And you can kind of accumulate them over time to demonstrate a broader skill set. So that's also something that you could consider in addition to certification. And then one more thing I'll mention, which we often forget about, and I have to say this university is not really taught, but should be taught more, and that is entrepreneurship. So the skills you need, whether to work as a sole trader to sell your services, but also if you're interested in starting a small business or a company, these I think are also things you could consider as part of that journey. So, in Australia, for example, I mean, it's actually straightforward. If you want to find practitioners, we have a NAATI directory, we have an AUSIT directory. So that's something you could also consider is working with your colleagues to start your own business or entrepreneurial projects. And again, they don't have to be limited just to translation and interpreting, because obviously TNI transfers into lots of different industries and sectors. So just to sum up, I would say career development, kind of 4 things here. Specialization, so what you really want to end up doing that will pay the bills, because usually specialization will get you the money you need to actually make a living. Secondly, certification, which NAATI plays an important role. and then CPD, so continuous professional development, micro-credentials, and then lastly, that point about entrepreneurship, which applies to most people because, again, most of us are not in-house, right? I mean, some are, but most of us are not in-house. So most of us will need to get better at selling our services. And, it can be a very competitive market, but that's super important, especially for translators in particular. I think gone are the days when you could just rely on agencies as a translator. Nowadays, you really have to develop a private clientele. And to be frank, for interpreters as well, a private clientele in the legal space, at least, can be an important part of that pathway. So they're kind of the main aspects I want to touch upon tonight. I introduced AUSIT to you. I talked about some of the benefits of AUSIT membership. I talked a bit about what employers are expecting of you as a translator interpreter, and then I went into some of the pathways for career development. I'm very happy to answer if there's any questions that participants have left and go from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you so much. That was a really good, overview of the professional association. So we do have a couple of questions. Before we go to the questions, very quickly, just to bring to the front of mind the fact that in our audience, we have aspiring interpreters and practicing interpreters, right? So for practicing interpreters, pardon me, a lot of the things you mentioned about the association and about the industry, they're already aware of and they make sense. For those aspiring interpreters that have taken the first step, completing the Interpreter Employment Success Program, what relationship can they have at this early stage in their interpreting career with the professional association?
Yes, I think relationship is the key word here, isn't it? I think AUSIT is trying to build these relationships at different levels. So, for example, AUSIT has local branches. So in Queensland, for example, we have a Queensland branch. We have regular social events where you get to meet your colleagues, make new friends in a relaxed environment. And then we have our PD. So Queensland is famous for our yearly PD day. We have a whole day for PD just for Queensland, which is quite amazing, like a mini conference kind of thing. And so that's really good at building those relationships. But also AUSIT, like I said, has language divisions. So I saw in the comments there are some Spanish language practitioners. The Spanish language division is the fiercest of all the language divisions. They're very passionate and they're always organizing new events, which are free, like I said, for AUSIT members. Two of our recent presidents were Spanish speakers, and they also contribute a lot to it. So we have that level of engagement, whether it be at the local level, but also with language divisions. And then also at the national level, because we have, like I said, national conference and national PD events to promote those relationships.
That's great. Thank you. So there's a lot of relationship built up potentially before one becomes a NATI credential practitioner, right? So that's really good to know. And also, as a side mentioned, the Queensland AUSIT branch is very, very active in comparison to the rest of the AUSIT branches in other states and territories. And they have formed a really particular situation within the branch where they get often or frequently together, as in face-to-face together, also virtually, and they do have a lot of initiatives. As Carl mentioned, there's the mini conference specifically in Queensland every year, I think in August. So that's a great opportunity too. We have put there the website, so the AUSIT website, which is ausit.org. Please feel free to go in there and have a look of what is available. So moving to another question, and of course it would be, how do you think the prospects of translation jobs are as AI progresses in the next decade?
Yes, it's a crucial question. We don't have the answer now. It's too early to say. Anyone who thinks they have the answer is trying to fool you. We don't have a crystal ball. And we can say that about any knowledge worker sector. So whether it be law, for example, medicine, psychology, which we originally assumed would be immune because they're more traditional, prestigious professions with many centuries of development. And so we kind of assumed that, translation and interpreting was somehow uniquely impacted. But time has shown that that's not the case, is that pretty much any profession which involves knowledge to some degree is being affected and will continue to be affected. So yes, it's very hard to say. With translation in particular, I think translation as a sector has been, significantly impacted by the advent of AI. The crucial question, though, is not about what AI can do. Instead, it's about what private companies, usually private companies, sometimes government, are willing to do with AI to further their aims, which in the case of private companies is profit, right? And that's really the key question. So whether they're willing to bypass human translators. And we know that AI by itself, unsupervised, is risky. There are inherent risks to it. The question is whether they care about mitigating the risk. That's the key question here. It's not about AI itself, and that's a really important distinction. We shouldn't spend too much time arguing about, oh, can AI do this? Can humans do that? That's really irrelevant at this point. So yes, there isn't an answer to that question. Like I said, translators are going through a very hard time now. Interpreters in Australia, at least, are insulated at this point. And that's because in Australia, the vast majority of interpreting services are purchased by government. And we know that governments are slow to respond to changes like that. But in this case, it might be a good thing because it means we are insulated for some time. But this is a constantly evolving space. So AUSIT will stand by and will continue to support practitioners and advocate for our expertise, for our human touch that can't be replicated by AI, but also to speak out about the risks involved, especially around unsupervised AI. So yeah, that's kind of my position on it. But if there's other questions, I'm happy to respond as well.
No, thank you for that. And also, obviously, training practitioners on how to best utilize the available tools, of which Gen AI tools are largely available and they spring up every other day. So, important, I guess, to keep in mind that, like with all other revolutions in the past centuries, workflows have changed. So it's not dissimilar to what happens currently. It's just a different scale and a different pace, which means we have to learn to do the things that we have expertise on differently as well. So
Yeah, that's a good point, Espina. If I can just add that this is where I think AUSIT, has really benefited the profession in terms of the position statement that we released recently, which goes into quite a bit of detail about how we can use AI, the ethical concerns, of which there are many around AI, and some of the risks involved. So definitely recommend colleagues to, if you just Google AUSIT AI position statement, you can have a look. It's a really useful document.
please do that because we need to understand what kind of regulations or recommendations are in place because these will be adopted by government as abroad or by other stakeholders in the very near future. So, in terms, we have a question from an aspiring interpreter that is interested to work in community interpreting or translation for people needing services like healthcare, courts, etc. So where do they start?
In Australia, the starting point for community interpreting tends to be around NADI certification, to be frank. So most for most people, that's where you start. So figuring out obviously what language you use. Different languages have different levels of certification. So for tier A and tier B languages, like I use Mandarin. So for Mandarin Chinese, that's a tier A language. So we have the full spectrum of certifications. And then for other languages, which are smaller languages, they may not have testing, but you can get in touch with NATI to determine whether you can get a recognition credential instead. So yeah, with NATI, I mean, obviously I'm not a spokesperson of NATI, but you can have a look on their website. It goes into quite a bit of detail. It's quite helpful to understand what is available for you according to your language. So once you have your certification in place, that's really where it begins. That's when you can start looking at the industry. We have limited time tonight, but I mean, it's really you want to look at your language, where you are, so what city, what state of Australia or New Zealand that you are in, because that will determine your on-site bookings, what's available. And then obviously you've got remote, so telephone interpreting and video on demand is a really big one. And LSPs like 2M offer the whole spectrum of jobs available for credentialed interpreters.
Thank you, Carl. Also, of course, we need to keep in mind that even though some of us might have other studies in the past, not specifically interpreting or translation studies, in order to sit the NATI certification exam for these 72 languages that certification exam is offered by NATI, we need to have completed formal interpreting studies. And simple as this sounds, there's so many different levels of interpreting studies available in the state and throughout Australia, starting from a very basic skill set course that lasts almost a semester, or a diploma, advanced diploma, or postgraduate studies, doctoral studies, etc. There isn't, to my knowledge, a bachelor degree currently for TNI, but there's TAFE for vocational studies and postgraduate studies that are available different duration, obviously, and different requirements. So they have to be NATI endorsed studies, but all tertiary institutions that offer interpreting and translation studies in Australia are NATI endorsed. So yeah, as Carl mentioned, worthwhile looking at the NATI website for more detail. Also, what are the main specialization areas for which there is high demand in Australia, Carl?
For interpreting specifically, Australia is quite special, I suppose, in that in this country, pretty much anyone who doesn't speak English as a first language has a kind of right, quote unquote, to access public services and also some private services with a free interpreter. So that means that in the health sector, because we know health is a massive sector, but also in law, legal sector, education, social services like Centrelink, for example, you're going to get, huge amount of government purchasing of interpreting services. So that's really where the demand is. Health is the biggest, and then everything else after that. So like I said, legal sector, community, social services, and so on. So as a community interpreter in Australia, we're a bit different to other countries, which distinguish between court and medical. We kind of expect interpreters to be able to take any job. Of course, you can choose the jobs you take, but we kind of expect that interpreters can run with whatever assignment they have and continuously update their knowledge as they are working.
Thank you. So we have a couple of aspiring interpreters that want to get certified because they have been working as interpreters in countries of origin or translators, which there isn't a body like NATI, like we have here. But the process is the same, even if some of us have language-related degrees, like teaching degrees or language per se degrees, still the requirement for NATI credentialing, and by NATI credentialing we mean both certification and recognition, is to have had formal interpreting studies. So we have the Interpreter Employment Success Program, which provides a complete overview of the industry, the stakeholders, the professional association being one of the, of course, big stakeholders within our industry, where you can get an idea and see if that might be, this industry, a good fit for you, and proceed from there to studying interpreting and or translation, and to getting certified or recognized. Also, I think the specialization areas are also language specific, right? Depending, for example, my working language is Greek, and there isn't a lot of simultaneous or real-time interpreting for Greek.
Yeah, so just to clarify that, so the word specialization doesn't really have like a very precise definition. So in Australia, we're talking about community interpreting. And then you've got a different sector, which is conference. So conference interpreting is a different sector with different skills. And so that would be its own specialization. So really, conference is a specialization. Community is a specialization. However, NATI does offer specialized credentials for health and for legal. However, they are limited to, I think it's 6 languages, a small number of languages: Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, Auslan, and so on. So that's basically the layout for interpreters in this country. Community, conference, and then I suppose business and delegation is kind of a different sector as well.
Excellent, thank you. Also, we've got a question. I'm not too sure that Carl will be, the right person to answer. If you could advise, what are the hourly rates paid to NATI interpreters?
There is no set hourly rate. There isn't an award in this country. So it varies wildly. You would have to ask the LSP that you're engaging, that you're working with. If it's a private client, of course, then you would charge whatever you want. But for LSPs, there's a huge variation. So there's really no point giving you a figure. I would recommend you reach out to the LSP and then ask them. NATI doesn't set the pay, by the way. NATI just provides the certificate.
And I don't know about other language service providers, but at 2M Language Services, we do pay differently according to the level of certification, recognition, or lack thereof. So it really depends whether someone is a recognized practicing interpreter, or a specialist health or specialist legal interpreter or simultaneous interpreter. They have a different way of pay. It's true there isn't a national award, but there is work being going on for some time now for a national award for us. And some states have recommended rates for interpreters. I know Victoria does for sure. So yeah, definitely with NATI certification or recognition, you have the possibility of being paid better. I want to hope
I
from
would
the
say,
LPs.
yeah, I was going to say, I think most major LSPs distinguish between credentialed and non-credentialed. Yeah.
We have, okay, many other questions. So what is the role of AUSIT in ensuring that practitioners have more opportunities to meet more LSPs and get job opportunities?
I would say the national conference is a really big one. So each year we hold a national conference in a different city, and that is a fantastic opportunity to meet LSPs face to face. We have some LSPs which set up stalls at the conference, so you can actually meet them and get to know them and ask questions face to face. I would say that's probably the best thing that AUSIT's doing in terms of introducing uh, practitioners to LSPs. Yeah, I would say that one.
Excellent. And this year's conference, I just put the link in the chat, is in
In Adelaide. Yeah, in
Delhi.
Adelaide in November. Yeah. Yeah, just Google AUSIT conference, you'll see it there.
Perfect. And what do you think, what's the best course that you could suggest for an interpreter who's working for 10 years and is NATI credentialed? I know it's not very clear, this question, but best course for achieving, I'm not sure. Maybe you have more ideas, Carl.
Yeah, there's different things you could do. I mean, in my case, for example, after I got my NATI and I started working, I wanted to have a credential for legal studies without doing a law degree. So I did a Diploma of Justice Studies and I got free TAFE, which is amazing. So I got a free course with Queensland TAFE. I did a Diploma of Justice Studies. So that's an example of a course you could do. Basically, any course which can show that you have these more specialized skills is going to be helpful for your career development as a translator or interpreter.
That's a very good idea, actually, and ties with the micro credentials you mentioned earlier, which are in the form of a short course provided by the association. Is that the idea?
Yeah, we're still working on that. At the moment, we're still doing the traditional approach, which is professional development, webinars and events and things like that. But I know our VP of PD, his name's Michael, he's been working on this concept. I think it would be interesting to provide very bespoke, very specific skill PD and micro credentials. So watch this space. We'll see how we go with it.
Great. One of the attendees is saying that they would like to pursue a path to work as a court interpreter. They've been checking court listings, but it's difficult to find which matters involve an interpreter. How can they get experience in court interpretation?
Yes, this is a good question because my students in front of me, I often invite them to come to court to observe me interpreting or other colleagues interpreting with their permission. So basically, the only guaranteed way to see interpreters in the wild is actually to meet interpreters, get to know us, and then ask politely, "Hey, do you mind if I check it out?" Um, in the legal sector, open court is really the only opportunity you'll get because everything else is confidential. So yeah, the best thing is to reach out to other interpreters, and you can do that through AUSIT and ask them if you can observe. If you can't do that, you can always check court lists and then look for names which correspond to your community. If you're lucky, you might be able to observe an interpreter in the wild.
We like that, an interpreter in the wild in action. So another participant is saying they have huge medical terminology and advocacy in healthcare experience that they'd like to use in hospitals, but no certification is available for their language, and it is impossible for them to get experience, meaning that there wouldn't be any really practicing interpreters currently.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, if the question is how to get NATI certification for recognized credential, that'd be a question with NATI. So NATI, in my experience, NATI is very easy to communicate with. You can send them questions, they respond fairly quickly. So just reach out to NATI. NATI is actually very encouraging. Like NATI really wants more people to get credentialed. So reach out to them and see what they advise. I'm sure they can come up with some way that you could get the credential, and that would lead to more assignments with LSPs and so on.
Okay, so they said they needed current work experience, but it is a catch-22. We understand that. Current work experience would be work integrated learning as well. As Carl said about NATI, they're not out there to disqualify people or disappoint people or, safeguard the credentials without giving them to anyone. It's about making sure that there is a certain quality, certain standards are adhered to. So, on this basis of understanding, yes, you can explore with them directly what the options are in this case.
Yes, and reach out, and you'll be surprised. Like NATI can be quite flexible. There might be some other thing that hasn't been considered yet. So reach out and see if there's some other pathway to get there.
Thank you. Actually, within the program, the Interpreter Employment Success Program, we have a very recent experience of a Sango speaking group from Townsville that are currently getting recognition. So they are currently being helped by NATI and assisted to acquire recognized practicing interpreter credential. So it's great. It's great what some, research persistence can do.
Fantastic. Mm.
Also, a diploma, can someone do a diploma of interpreting and start working before getting CPI, so Certified Provisional Interpreter from NATI, or do they have to get Certified Provisional Interpreter in order to work?
I mean, look, there are a lot of LSPs out there, and different LSPs have different policies. It really just depends on the LSP. So you just have to ask the LSP that you're working with and see what they accept. But ideally, you should wait until you get CPI. That's kind of the baseline for languages that do have testing.
Correct. And CPI is the first credential that someone can get for the languages that NATI testing exists. However, some languages have the highest level or the highest credential is CPI, right? They don't have CI.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, I think so. Yes. Mm. So you're saying they don't have CI? Yes, I believe that's the case. Some languages only have CPI. Yeah.
Correct. And generally, this is the credential required from the government sector, so hospitals, courts, tribunals. If, providing legal interpreting to courts and tribunals, there is no way when there are certified practitioners available than a non-certified practitioner will be accepted. So your chances of landing interpreting assignments, of having consistently jobs coming through, increase, by getting the highest possible certification available in your language.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think, and that brings us obviously to the end of the presentation about the professional association, about AUSIT. Please make sure to explore the AUSIT website and all the material that's available there for both early career practitioners, but also, interpreters with a lot of experience under their belt, and also the events, very important. The networking aspect, the social connection aspect is just as important, along with the professional, obviously, and the business skills and the self-care and the well-being, all of these. So it's about remaining connected. Thank you again to our national president. Thank you again, Carl, for making the time from the class from the University of Queensland. And we hope to catch you at the next networking session, maybe of the Queensland AUSIT branch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Thank you to our Auslan interpreter, and we'll see you at the next IESP webinar. Thank you. Have a good rest of your evening. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.